So, as players continue to spank Ragnaros week in week out in Firelands, we are now headed towards the final conclusion of Cataclysm with Dragon Soul, the ultimate controversial ending to what is still one of WoW's most controversial expansions. And overall I would agree that I generally enjoyed what I played of Cataclysm quite a lot more than I did back in the day, in comparison to its original run. However, a key point of that is saying what I played of Cataclysm, which is essentially leveling, tier 11 and a little bit of tier 12. And with other options available at the moment in World of Warcraft, Cataclysm, although maybe being better than last time, now feels slightly ignored. So we're relying once again on Dragon Soul for a big finish this time around, yet with a reputation for being arguably the worst last raid in any expansion of WoW. Is it actually as bad as people say it is? First, we need to understand that back in the day, the build up to this raid was absolutely huge. Coming off the back of having Icecrown Citadel finish off Wrath of the Lich King, we were expecting a big finish to Cataclysm as well. Yet, things hadn't quite always gone as rosy with Cataclysm, so a lot was riding on a huge positive finish for the expansion, and the build up to the face-off with Deathwing had been a bit of a strange one. Unlike in Wrath, where we had seen a fair bit of the Lich King, hearing his presence in Naxxramas and multiple questlines and dungeons, as well as him rocking up to the Argent tournament and exploding the floor, his presence was felt a lot in the build-up, so finally facing him was long anticipated. However, Deathwing didn't have quite such a full frontal presence throughout the expansion, turning up in a few quests but not really having too much of a direct presence. He was more someone that people spoke about, in dungeons, raids and quests, as everyone talked about the Hour of Twilight. So there was a bit more hope and mystery to having this final face-off with him, and well, it didn't quite go to plan in the final encounters of Dragon Soul. Say that they were lackluster is quite an understatement, but we'll touch on that later as we first speak about what Dragon Soul did that was actually pretty good. First up, gear looked fantastic for Dragon Soul. Much like the gear for Icecrown Citadel, visually the gear looked like worthy of being in a final big raid encounter, and had a good impact when you saw players in various versions of their normal and heroic tier gear. Basically, the stuff was epic. For me, the warrior set is absolutely fantastic, as you basically look like a mini Deathwing. And even though I don't main warrior, it's probably still one of my favourite tier sets of all time in WoW. So visually, it's a good feast. And on the note of visuals, the actual environment for the raid is fantastic. From the very second that you enter straight into absolute mayhem in a very familiar setting at the Vermis Temple, with Deathwing flying around bearing down on everyone, with lots of old god goop everywhere and general craziness going on. And whilst for me entering the dungeon through the caverns of time felt a bit lackluster, the inside of the instance more than made up for things, as it was a true feast for the eyes and once again brought about that presence that was worthy of an end expansion raid. Similarly, a lot of the boss fights were actually pretty fun in this raid and looked great also, with a huge focus on the old gods for a lot of the start of this raid, which is obviously a consistent fan favourite running theme in all of World of Warcraft. And there were lots of extra cool bits to this raid, like returning to the Vermis Temple for the whole thing, but also still travelling to past raids like Eye of Eternity for part of the storyline, or being sent into a void-lodged area. And mentioning the storyline, part of it that was great was to have seen all these huge characters like Thrall and the dragon aspects meeting in a time of urgency, the same way we saw a great coalition of characters like in Icecrown Citadel. And to me, this is the impression that the first 3/4 of the raid are actually quite good and significantly better than the last bit. You have a great looking instance that feels huge in nature, some pretty good boss fights to kick things off, and build up some anticipation of where you're heading. A theme that is basically the end of the world that truly does feel like it, and you actually are seeing Deathwing in all of his glory throughout the whole raid, which was very different to a lot of the past expansion, and it almost felt like everything that Cataclysm should be. But then we sadly come to what was meant to be the ultimate climax, a moment that was supposed to redeem Cataclysm for all of its failures, an expansion that had really torn a player base and made it seem like WoW had lost its way. And for all of that, we got Thrall shooting Deathwing out of the sky with a huge dinner plate. We then got to ride Deathwing's back for a bit on Spine of Deathwing, a cool looking encounter, but to me the fact that this was a boss fight was a bit of a joke. This should have never been a boss fight, this would have made a good in-between stage to get from one place to the next. But hey, I could have lived with it if it wasn't for madness of Deathwing basically being us the players becoming the true NPCs of the story, as essentially we trimmed Deathwing's toenails whilst the super good heroes did all the work and take all the glory. I mean look, there's a huge difference in how things should have gone. Once again, if we throw it back to Icecrown Citadel and the final encounter with the Lich King, Tyrion is frozen at the start, so all of the responsibility is taken on by the players. And once Arthas decides to one-shot the entire raid group, Tyrion calls upon the light to save all of our bacon, yet it's still then the players that finish off the Lich King with Tyrion's aid. In Dragon Soul it feels so lackluster because ultimately it feels like you don't really have anything to do with fighting Deathwing, especially after considering the lack of face-to-face build-up to then not ever really have a proper confrontation. It feels a bit empty. And back in the day, a big issue with this lackluster fight that left a bitter taste in your mouth is that bitter taste stayed for a long time back then. And believe me, running a raid that people find hard to enjoy due to a terrible ending seemed bad enough. But back then, with the original announcement of Mists of Pandaria, players were not happy at all with where they found WoW in. And although Mists is now looked back upon as a favourable expansion by a lot of people, at the time players were very divided on it, if not more hateful towards it than they were even Cataclysm, as they thought it was an absolute joke that was like Kung Fu Panda, and this was definitely not where WoW should have been going. Yet players now are looking forward to Mists, and those who play Cataclysm tend to enjoy it more. So is Dragon Soul as bad as remembered? I would say now we know what we're heading into, it's likely that you should enjoy the good parts of it more and take the last two fights as a bit of a novelty, knowing that soon enough you'll be enjoying Mists of Pandaria and that ultimately you can probably have some great fun with Dragon Soul for the few months that it will be running. And really also the 3 heroic dungeons we get alongside Dragon Soul are really great. Yet if I'm honest, I probably won't be checking it out again. For me, I didn't enjoy it enough to want to head back into it, and I don't blame anyone else that feels that way. So be sure to let me know if you're checking out Dragon Soul for the first time, or if you're simply waiting to hit up Mists of Pandaria at this point. Yet as always, take care out there, and I'll see you on the next one. Ta-ra for now.
As always, if you're new here, feel free to like and subscribe. And on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.